Part 6 of Abraham Lincoln, A Commemoration, by various. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. Part 6. Respect for the memory of Abraham Lincoln. Resolution adopted at a meeting of Senators and Representatives, April 17, 1865. Essay by Charles Sumner. Respect for the memory of Abraham Lincoln. Resolution adopted at a meeting of Senators and Representatives, April 17, 1865. President Lincoln breathed his last on the morning of Saturday, April 15th. Congress not being in session, there was a meeting of Senators and Representatives then in Washington, April 17th, at noon, when Hon. Lafayette S. Foster, President pro tem of the Senate, was called to the chair, and Hon. Schuyler Colfax was chosen Secretary. Senator Foote of Vermont stated the object of the meeting. On motion of Mr. Sumner, a committee of 5 from each House was ordered to report at 4:00 p.m. on the action proper for the meeting. The chair appointed Mr. Sumner, Mr. Harris of New York, Mr. Reverdy Johnson of Maryland, Mr. Ramsey of Minnesota, and Mr. Conness of California on the part of the Senate, also Mr. Washburne of Maine and Mr. Colruff of Pennsylvania on the part of the House of Representatives. On motion of Mr. Schenck, the chairman and secretary of the meeting were added to the committee. The committee reported a list of pallbearers for the funeral, and also a congressional committee of 1 from each State to accompany the remains of the late President to Illinois, which were adopted by the meeting. They also reported the following resolution, drawn by Mr. Sumner, which was unanimously agreed to. The members of the Senate and House of Representatives now assembled in Washington, humbly confessing their dependence upon Almighty God, who rules all that is done for human good, make haste at this informal meeting to express the emotions with which they have been filled by the appalling tragedy that has deprived the nation of its head and covered the land with mourning, and in further declaration of their sentiments resolve unanimously, 1. That in testimony of their veneration and affection for the illustrious dead, who has been permitted, under Providence, to do so much for his country and for liberty, they will unite in the funeral services, and by an appropriate committee will accompany his remains to their place of burial in the State from which he was taken for the national service. 2. That in the life of Abraham Lincoln, who by the benignant favor of republican institutions rose from humble beginnings to the height of power and fame, they recognize an example of purity, simplicity, and virtue which should be a lesson to mankind, while in his death they acknowledge a martyr whose memory will become more precious as men learn to prize those principles of constitutional order and those rights, civil, political, and human, for which he was made a sacrifice. 3. That they invite the President of the United States by solemn proclamation to recommend that the people of the United States shall assemble on a day appointed by him in public testimony of their grief, and to dwell on the good that has been done on earth by him we now mourn. 4. That a copy of these resolutions be communicated to the President of the United States, and also to the afflicted widow of the late President, as an expression of sympathy in her great bereavement. End of Part 6.